Hey, welcome to Keeping It 100, where we have these open and honest conversations to make sure you get all the information you need to make better health decisions. I'm your host, Dr. Krista Motley, and of course, we have a great show for you today. As always, during the show, you may think of questions, so just put those questions in the chat. I have my good friend, Dr. Renee Jones, behind the scenes, my DJ, here helping to make sure that your questions get answered. So just pop them in the chat, and she'll keep an eye on that. Now, I just want to start off by talking a little bit about the fact that we are seeing COVID cases on the rise yet again. So just want to remind you all to wear your mask, be masked up whenever you're in public, especially when you're indoors. If you can get your hands on one, wear an N95. If you cannot, try to get some surgical masks. You can get those from the pharmacies. They're all very well stocked now. But thankfully, hospitalizations aren't going up, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. And it may be because so many people were sick over the holidays and at the beginning of the year. A lot of people had COVID then, so maybe people, still have protection from when they had COVID just a few months ago. So the data will tell us, time will tell what's going on, but regardless if you had COVID, if you did not, if you're vaccinated, if you're not, we all just need to mask up when we're out in public because we still have some people who have not been vaccinated or who can't get the vaccine, like my 2-year-old son. So he can't get vaccinated. So I do every single thing that I can do to protect him. And that means when I'm out and about, I have a mask on. Now, if you're not vaccinated yet, I totally get it. You probably have more questions than we have answers for. We're all learning through this together. We're all trying to get through this together. I certainly understand, but I hope that there's some information that's shared on the show or some other trusted information that you find that is helpful in moving you toward protecting yourself in a way that we know that works. We know that the vaccines work. We know that they're safe, and we want to get as many people protected as possible. A lot of people don't know this, but when you are not vaccinated and you have COVID, you spread the disease to more people quicker than people who have been vaccinated. And that's just because you don't have any protection. And so you don't have anything in your body at that time when you're exposed and you're first starting to get sick to keep the virus down. And so it's just replicating and you're just spilling it out. And so you're infecting more people when you don't have the vaccine. Now, when you do have the vaccine, you can still transmit the disease, the virus to other people, but not as easily and not to as many people. And so that's another reason that we want people to get protected with the vaccine because you help protect other people that's around you, especially people that can't get vaccinated, like my 2-year-old son. So I just want you to think and I just want you to consider the information that we have to share on the show. I try to bring in the top experts in their field to address the hard questions and to address your concerns. I think too many times we, believe dumb stuff and foolishness and distractions, and we have to start to try to figure out how to separate good quality information from foolishness and distractions. We want to go with information that has been scientifically proven. This is a public health crisis. This is a health thing. Health and diseases, we find treatments and preventions through science. And so anything else is not a good way to use to make health decisions. So don't just believe whatever anyone tells you, including me. Challenge me. Make sure that I'm on my game and make sure that I'm, telling honest and accurate information. Don't just believe anything you read. Challenge it, look into it, dig deeper. Try to find exactly where is this information coming from. Is it coming from a place that I can trust? Make it make sense to you. So again, always be asking questions. Challenge your healthcare providers too. I do this all the time, especially when it's the pediatricians that I'm talking to about the kids. I want to know, why do you want to run this test and not this test? Or why you want to start this medication and not this medication? Like, I need to know what is the rationale behind every decision that you're making, and where did that come from? Is this something that you're just trying and testing and making up? Or is this something that comes from what has been studied and proven by the science? So I know I worked their last nerve, but these are my kids, so I got to do that. So as I mentioned, I try to bring in the top experts in their field to address our questions. And so I want to welcome back Dr. Kelechi Lawrence. Hey, Dr. Lawrence.
Hello, Dr. Motley. How are you? Good to
I'm
be
doing
with you
good.
again.
Thanks for being here again today. I just want to remind you all who you are seeing today. He is the president of the Delaware Africa Coalition. He is a pharmacologist with over 2 decades of experience working in a lab, working on vaccines for major pharmaceutical companies. So when I'm asking him these questions, I know he knows the answer. He doesn't have to look it up. Half the time I have to look things up. He already knows it because this is his work. This is what he does. And so before I go into my questions for today, I want to give a recap of what we talked about last week, just to bring everybody up to speed in case anyone missed it. So last week we talked about what happened when the pandemic hit, and you said that when the World Health Organization called this thing a pandemic, that piqued the interest of drug companies all over the world. They was like, how we gonna get in on this? And so they sent their people into the lab to find a vaccine that could possibly work. And then we talked about, how were these vaccines discovered so fast? Because it was like a year later we had 2 vaccines available, and for a lot of us, including me, I was like, I don't want that fast vaccine. I don't want no warp speed vaccine. No, thank you. But what you did was you confirmed for us that it is true that it usually takes at least 10 years before a vaccine can be studied and enough time to get approved. And it did appear that things that they skipped out on this 10-year thing. However, especially what Moderna and what Pfizer did was they went to a technology that had already been studied for at least two or 3 decades. They used that technology, which is the mRNA technology, to see if it was something that could work for COVID. So they didn't start from scratch with this mRNA technology in 2019 or 2020. This was discovered several decades ago. They pulled it out to see if it would work. And that's how we got here. So it wasn't that it was, just discovered in 2019 or 2020. We, had enough research around for years of research to try that particular technology for COVID, and it worked. Is that true, right?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. Yes. So
Okay.
this isn't just something that is new and started. And let me also add here that I do know when people talk about pharmaceutical companies, or it appears that we don't have real people working there. Actually, there are real people working at these pharmaceutical companies like myself. And the reason why that is important is that some of the products that these pharmaceutical companies make also, the workers, the staff, the employees of the company have to rely upon. Because you can think about it, when a pandemic hits, or any germ that is out there affecting the public, it doesn't say, well, I'm not going to affect pharmaceutical company staff, people, whatever. So we're all at risk is what I'm trying to say here. And so the products that are made, we have to be careful that they are safe enough, because we could wind up taking those products, needing them, in fact, for our lives, our relations, and so on and so forth can wind up taking these. So, that can help you, again, put it in a little bit of perspective to know that pharmaceutical company is not some kind of eccentric entity. It's actually real people like you and me.
That's a really good point. Just like you're saying, there are people who work for these huge companies that often take the medications that you're discovering and promoting. And so it's not just like this box creating something that's putting out to the rest of the world, but it's a group of people who are working together to help find cures and treatments for diseases that affect them. It affects their families and affects everyone else. And
Correct.
so I think that's a really, really good point. So thanks for reminding us that real people work at these big pharmaceutical companies, because they just kind of seem like one entity that just
Correct.
wants to make money. It's just one entity, and all they want to do is make money.
That's it.
But
Exactly.
it's hard to imagine the people that actually work there that they also benefit from all the discoveries that come out of the drug companies as well. So thanks for saying that. That's so, so true. All right. So then we kind of moved into other ways that helps us to save time. And you talked about the artificial intelligence and the new technologies that were being used in the labs, where we used to have to wait weeks to get the response, and now you only have to wait a few hours to get test results or certain data. And so having that information available so quickly has helped to save time tremendously.
Right.
And so that was a good point that you brought up as well. We also talked about how these drug companies collaborated. So typically drug companies, they are trying to be the biggest, they are trying to be the richest, they are trying to be the baddest, not the baddest, but they're trying to be like the biggest, and they're trying to be the
So
first.
it's a competition as in any other,
Any business,
product area. So you are
Mhm.
competing against each other, with your technology, with your information, with your approach, and so on and so forth. And so usually, when you're doing that, you have to protect that information, because that's the only way you can actually leverage it, to gain market advantage over your over other competitors and stuff. Yes, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Nope.
that's just the
That's
way
business.
things are done. Yeah, exactly.
Yep, that's business. But in this particular situation, we saw collaboration between the drug
Correct.
companies. And so
Correct.
that was a beautiful thing, because this was a thing that was affecting everybody and all the workers at all these drug companies and people all over the world. And so it was beautiful to see the pharmaceutical industry collaborate and to share information with each other, including the governments as well, to help us to get to a solution, because there were so many people dying every day of this disease. That was beautiful. Then we went into the ingredients some. So I asked you, what is in this vaccine? We talked about for the mRNA vaccines, the main ingredient is the mRNA, the messenger RNA, and that just tells your body to make this spike protein. And then once your body makes the spike protein, your body will then create its own antibodies, so that if you're exposed to the coronavirus, you already have the protection that you need. And then you explained that how mRNA is very unstable, and that it needs this like posse around it to help keep it and to help allow it to work in your body before it breaks down and does nothing at all. And so you explained that there were some components involved. They were inactive, but they kind of help the mRNA do its job, and that they were like some sugars and some salts, some fats and some buffers, and that they all work together to stabilize and preserve the messenger RNA, but they
Correct.
don't do anything else. They're just
Correct.
there so that it helps it to work.
Correct. And even the temperature, and temperature is also a very big component, right?
Yeah.
So why it has to be, so all of that is just to make sure that the mRNA is stable until it gets into your body. All right. And once it gets into your body and is translated, then it can be degraded. But all these components are there simply to keep it stable until it gets to your body, and then tells your cells to make the spike protein.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. So
And all these ingredients, for that matter, a lot of these ingredients are also in so many other products that we take. That's another point. So they are not unique to the COVID vaccines, right? Like the buffers, like PEG. If you take any drug, it can be generic, it can be prescription, whatever. If you take a lot of drugs and look at them, chances are you're going to see PEG in there. It's a very common ingredient in a lot of the drugs that we take. right?
Mhm.
Some of these salts, sodium chloride, sodium chloride is salt, table salt, right? So a lot of the ingredients in the COVID vaccine are also in so many other drugs that we take. So there's nothing unique about them, really. As a matter of fact, that's how we know that we could use these kind of components and test them or do the combination to stabilize this stuff, because we have already been using them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's comforting knowing that. So this isn't really new stuff. It's
No,
just
not
a
at
new
all.
vaccine because it's a new disease.
Correct.
But all these things are things that are in a lot of the pharmaceuticals that we take and use anyway.
Correct.
Thanks for adding that in.
Thank you.
And then I know we had a question from a viewer last week who asked about graphene oxide, and was that a component of the vaccine? And you confirmed that it's absolutely not involved in any of the vaccines available. And we talked about how that came from a source that just could not be trusted. People make up things to scare people, to confuse people, and that was an example of that. So I'm glad that that question was asked. Very valid question. But we were able to provide the answer to that. So today I wanted to ask, we talk about these ingredients, and I think you just answered this question. I was going to ask you, how do we know that they're safe? And it sounds like we know that they're safe because we've been using them for years and other vaccines and other diseases. And so we already have a lot of experience with the components of the vaccines. And so that's how we know that they're safe. Now, the mRNA technology is new for new for this COVID vaccine, but it had been studied for years, right?
Correct. And in fact, another reason why we know they are safe, I would say that the COVID vaccine is probably the vaccine that has been administered to most people. To date, over 11 billion doses of the vaccine have been administered in the United States. More than 560 million doses have been administered. Okay. Now, if something is not safe, in fact, in more than 184 countries around the world. Okay. So again, if it is not safe, and you are administering it in such a large population, in such a large amount, people will be dropping dead, because a lot of these places that we're talking about are not like the United States, where there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of control, and so on and so forth. So if the vaccine wasn't safe and is being administered to so many people, we will have a lot of cases from around the world. And right now we don't. So again, that's something that should also put it in perspective. Has there been any other product that has been administered, any other vaccine that has been administered to so many people in so many places around the world? And there isn't.
Yeah, it has a good track record. It has a good track record, especially when you're thinking about safety concerns and side effects. And I know that's a big concern for people. It's like, well, what about all these side effects that have been reported to the FDA on VAERS? And, we talked about a little bit that you're not going to escape side effects from any medications. You're just not. But what is the severity of those side effects is what you want to consider. And
but let me put in perspective about side effects. And in fact, and I'm glad you're bringing up VAERS, vaccine system for reporting adverse events in the United States. So an adverse event, is anything that happens after you get exposed to a drug or vaccine in this case. Okay. So if you get the vaccine and you get out there and a bike hits you, guess what? That's actually now an adverse event. Why? Because it happened after you got exposed to this drug. But did the drug have anything to do with it? The answer is no. So when we talk about adverse events, it is important to understand that any and everything is being recorded to see if we can find any trends. That's really the point of it, right? And most of the time, a lot of the reported adverse events are not really purely adverse events related to the drug. Okay. And in those situations where you have things that may be related, and I'm not going to tell you that there are no adverse events that are related to the drug, right? As an example, somebody could have an allergic reaction to one of the components, right? Just like you do with the flu vaccine. So before you do the flu vaccine, or in fact any vaccine, they ask you, do you have latex allergy? Now, there's no latex in the COVID vaccine. Do you have egg allergy? Okay, you see, do you have nut allergy? So these are questions that are asked, and some people have these allergies. It doesn't mean that the vaccine or the drug is bad, right? It just means that you have an allergic reaction to one of the components. Okay, and so that's something that needs to be monitored. But in terms of really making people sick or having adverse reactions that are bad, these vaccines are relatively safe, quite safe, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
The extreme side effects, like the worst of the side effects that occur, and we're going to talk about that in the show as soon as I can get somebody approved to talk about it, because apparently the drug companies, it's a long approval process to get their employees to come on and talk publicly about something.
Sure.
They can share information with the medical community, but to share it publicly, it takes it's a long approval process. But I wanted to bring up Nolan's question.
Well, hang on. I'm seeing something. It says they are very severe, and this is why they have not been approved for children. That's actually not true whatsoever. Okay. The reason they have not been approved for children, and again, and I'm glad such points are being made.
Yes.
So in developing a drug, vaccine, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? There are stages that you have to go through. Okay. There's a very rigorous process that you have to follow. So you have to define your target population where you're going to administer this drug. Okay. And generally, children actually are the last to be for most drugs to be studied in, because children, especially things like vaccines or whatever, because their immune system is a little different, is still developing, and so on and so forth, they may require a higher or lower dose than adults because of that difference in the maturity of their immune system, and so on and so forth. So it takes time to study drugs in children, right? So, and that is the reason why it's taking this much time. So it isn't that, it is because of severe adverse effects. That's the reason why it hasn't been studied. Because in order to study a particular population, you have to design a study according to the attributes of that particular population, so that you make sure it is sufficiently safe to study, and that you are able to define the efficacy of the drug, as well as any side effect that the drug has in that particular population. So the reason why children are the last is generally that. Another population that often we don't study drugs in are pregnant women. Okay, pregnant women. In fact, most of the time, if a woman is pregnant, we don't want to study the drug in her, because now we're looking at more than one person at a time. And in fact, the states that the body is in during pregnancy can also be a complicating factor. And so we want to remain very careful about that. However, sometimes people get into clinical trials and then they become pregnant. Okay. So they might have gone into the clinical trial without, but if that happens, then they are monitored very closely to see if the pregnancy has any effect on the drug efficacy or even adverse event side effects, and so on and so forth. So I guess the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that the population that is being studied is very carefully selected to ensure safety first and foremost, okay, and to ensure that the efficacy can be demonstrated in that particular population. Because if it isn't, then the population is not going to be studied.
So it sounds like children and pregnant women are always going to be the last to be
They last,
studied.
exactly. Yeah.
Typically, unless there was like a specific concern for pregnant women and they
Exactly.
needed to do something to do it quicker.
Correct.
Because I know that for COVID vaccines, they are they are trying to get pregnant women vaccinated, because when pregnant women get COVID, they have such a high risk of being in the ICU. It's like a really big deal, and they've been having a really, really hard time with getting pregnant women to get the COVID vaccine. And I completely understand that, and we're going to bring on an expert to talk about that too. I wanted to mention, so thank you for confirming that. I know that one thing that came up a lot was the ability of the mRNA vaccines to change our DNA. What do you know about that?
So actually, that's one of those conspiracy theories, right? The same as you're being injected with microchips or stuff like that. So mRNA doesn't have any ability whatsoever to change DNA. And just like you said in your introductory remarks, mRNA is very unstable, very, very unstable. Okay. Once it goes into the cytoplasm, is translated, it is almost immediately destroyed. So it doesn't even get into the nucleus where the DNA is, right? And it has nothing really. I mean, there's no way. mRNA is not an enzyme that is going to affect your DNA and so on and so forth. So it's just one of those ideas that people have, come up with, that has gotten traction. But I want to, reassure our listening audience today that the mRNA vaccine has absolutely no ability to alter anybody's DNA in any way.
Thanks for confirming that, because that was a concern that I had too before I started to, to read up on this and decide to get vaccinated. I was like, I don't want this changing my DNA. I'm good. But, it's just a thing that you hear and it makes sense until you really start to read and to learn and to understand. And so that's why I think that having these conversations is really important, because a lot of people don't hear the other side to the story. They just hear that mRNA, it kind of sounds like DNA, is going to change my DNA, and that's just not true. And so thank you for clarifying that for our audience. I wanted to go back to the ingredients real quick. Is there a place where people can find the list of ingredients? I think Renee may have put it in a chat. I'm not sure, but if you can, tell people where they could go if they want to see what are all the ingredients in the 3 vaccines.
Exactly. So very quickly, a vaccine is a product. A drug is a product. And I'm sitting, I think it looks like you are in a pharmacy or something. You have drugs.
This is a lab at the school.
It's the lab at the school. Okay, you have drugs. So and they're like your cereal, right? You have Kellogg's, General Mills. On the side of the box, it tells you what's in it. Right?
Yeah.
And some of the things in the cereal that you're eating, as an example, have names that you don't know and don't even understand. Maybe they use the chemical names or whatever. The same thing applies to a drug, any drug that you take, a vaccine. So, your pharmacist can give you the ingredients, right? The prescribing information is often, that's where you find all this stuff, right? You can get it from the pharmacist, from your doctor. You can also get it online, right? As you can with any of these products, you can search for it and you will find it. But it isn't a hidden piece of information. You can get it on CDC website. You can get it on FDA website, So there are many places where you can get the ingredients, and you should be asking or looking at the ingredients. They are not hidden, and they shouldn't be hidden, because the public need to know what are the components of these drugs.
Yep, absolutely. And so I would reiterate, I would only trust information that I see on the CDC website or on the FDA website, or if you go directly to the manufacturer's website. Anything anywhere else, I would just question it, because you just don't know who's writing it, who's behind it, who's trying to confuse you, who's lying to you. I would be careful with looking at any other website to get the
So,
ingredients, or you can
so,
stop at
so
the pharmacy too.
your pharmacist, exactly,
Yeah.
because a lot of these pharmacies are now administering these vaccines.
Yep.
If you ask, they can give you the prescribing information. They can even make a copy of it for you. And, you know, even when a lot of prescriptions are filled, they provide you with the prescribing information and the content of, you know, so that you know the, you know, clinical pharmacology of the medicine and so on and so. So you have access to all this information, and there's nothing unique here. So if you ask for it, you can get it.
Yep, absolutely. And I just wanted to mention that Renee put in the comments the links to the CDC website, so you can get all the information about what's in the COVID vaccines from there. And my last question for you, Dr. Kelechi, is how is the way that these COVID vaccines work different from how other vaccines work, like chickenpox or measles, or, you know, the ones that have been given out forever and we've gotten them and we haven't questioned them? How do they work different?
Okay, so again, that's an excellent question. They work differently in that they are targeting different antigens, right? But the way most vaccines work is exactly the same way. Okay, they are priming your body, preparing your body to defend itself against a foreign antigen by making antibodies, right, that then protect you when you become exposed to that antigen. Okay,
can you define what an antigen is?
So an antigen is anything that your body considers to be a foreign substance. It could be a protein, it could be a piece of DNA, it could be, you know, anything that is foreign to your body. Okay,
not supposed to be there.
It's not supposed to be
virus
there.
that's
It's not
supposed to be there.
Exactly. So like the spike protein of COVID is a foreign body, it's a foreign protein, right? And so what the vaccine is doing is, when you're given the mRNA vaccine, the mRNA tells your body to make the spike protein, okay, in amounts that are not, you know, that are not high, okay? Now, once your body makes the protein, your immune cells will immediately recognize, this is foreign substance, and they're going to start making antibodies to it. And then those antibodies that are now made are waiting for when you get exposed to the spike protein from outside, from COVID virus itself, right? When you now get exposed to it, you have these antibodies. The antibodies will basically gobble up the virus so that it doesn't go into your body and start multiplying and then get you sick. That's kind of really the way that it works. And that's pretty much also the standard way that most vaccines work. They prepare your body to defend you against this foreign molecule.
So it's nothing really new about how these vaccines are working. They all pretty much do the same thing. They help your body make its own antibodies so that when you're exposed to the antigen or the foreign substance or the virus, bacteria, whatever it is that's not supposed to be in your body, you already have the defenses in place to attack. You don't get sick and you don't die.
That's exactly it. Yes, that is exactly it. Because, you know, whether it is a virus, whether it's bacterium, whether it is whatever that gets into your body that is foreign, you know, when a virus gets into your body, it's going to get into the cell and it's going to start dividing and it's going to start killing your cells, right? The same thing with bacteria. And so, and usually, in order for a virus to get into your body, in the case of the COVID virus as an example, it uses the spike protein, which attaches to a receptor on your cell, and then that pulls it into the cell, and then it begins to replicate. So what the antibodies do is, as soon as the virus comes in, they will recognize, oh, I've seen this protein before. They will coat, they will gobble up, right? You know, the spike protein, so that the spike protein will not be able to attach to the receptor on the cell and then get into the cell.
Get in.
That's how it works. Okay, so that's what the vaccine, the basic vaccine does, basic antibody does. Once the antibody is there, when you now become exposed, the antibody will not allow that antigen, whether it be a virus or bacterium, to get into your body and then begin to mess you up.
So I think it's important to note that, because we don't hear about a lot of these diseases much more, the ones that we have vaccines to. So like the measles and the mumps and the chickenpox, like people don't get these things as bad as they used to get them at the rates that they used to get them, because we've had these vaccines that pretty much they all kind of work in the same way to help.
Well, how about polio?
Polio
Has been eradicated.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, it's no longer really a thing in this country. But guess what? There are still some places around in the world where polio is still affecting people till today. So it has not been eradicated. It has been eradicated in a lot of places, in a lot of countries in the world, but there are still some places where it hasn't. And it is all related to the rate of vaccination.
Yeah. So we want to get COVID behind us. We need to, help people who are concerned, who, and the concerns are valid. I get that, because there's so much information and it's just a bunch of confusion. But hopefully there's something that was shared to help you to think about it in a little different way, so we can get COVID behind us once and for all.
Correct.
So we are going to wrap up today's show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thanks, Dr. Kelechi, for part 1 and part 2 of this discussion. I don't know what I'm doing next week. We'll see what the Lord lays on my heart for us to talk about next week. But y'all stay tuned. If you have questions about the vaccines in the meantime, you can always call or text me at 267-322-0470. And I will definitely get back to you. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.